Robert Badinter, you are a former Minister of Justice in France, former garde des Sceaux, it's the highest position in justice, and you led the campaign successfully to abolish the death penalty in France. What do you think now is the situation for human rights at the global level?
Large progresses, but there's still much to do. But undoubtedly, when you consider what was the situation in '48, at the peak of the Cold War in the world, in December, when was adopted the Universal Declaration, you realize how much we have been ahead, and especially after the collapse of the Berlin Wall. The only ideology to which there is universal reference is les droits de l'homme, the human rights. Of course, you have different interpretations, but for the core of it, everybody agrees. Doesn't mean that everybody respects them, but lip service at least.
Thierry de Montbrial, when he began this conference, said that there's a need perhaps for a change in the human rights law, human values law. Is there a real distinction between values and rights?
He's right in proclaiming the necessity of having more, further understanding of what the word values means. But when you consider rights, they are at the very end nothing but values embodied and who can be, as the English always remind, enforceable in courts. The last statement, to my opinion, is the most important one. The most remarkable characteristic of our days in the field of law is that fundamental rights, which were only proclaimed, are now enforceable before courts, and notably before international or regional courts, like mostly the European Courts of Human Rights.
A final question. You were very successful in abolishing the death penalty in France, and obviously in the European Union there is no death penalty. But if you take China, the biggest country in the world, most populous country in the world, or the United States, or Iran, or Pakistan, and so on, there is still, or Saudi Arabia, there is still the death penalty. Can you see that changing?
Yes, I'm very optimistic, which is not in my nature, but I'm very optimistic about the progresses towards universal abolition. In 30 years, we have come from 30 states to 138 who are abolitionists, de facto, or for the greatest part, de jure, in the United Nations. You mentioned 3 cases. In China, there is an abolitionist movement, which is getting strength. There have been progresses in terms of control of procedures by the Supreme Court and a lowering of executions. And furthermore, as the Chinese are now looking for a new ideology, they will go back to the old one, which is Confucianism. And the Confucianism cannot live with death penalty. So I'm optimistic. In the United States, the decline of the death penalty is the characteristic of the 5 past years. Half less executions, far less sentences. In fact, it's only in the southern part of the United States and mostly in Texas that you still carry on death penalty. But in the past years, you have had New York State, Illinois, New Jersey, who have abolished death penalty. Now, the great problem, because it is a difference in ideology, is the question of the Islamic integrist societies, like Iran or like Saudi Arabia. In this respect, they can be compared. We are highly preoccupied with the situation in Iran. Not only they have not lowered the number of executions, but it has increased notably against women. In Saudi Arabia, same. There, the problem is difficult because the theory is human rights, yes, but they have been given to us by God, and therefore we have to interpret the human rights according to God's word, which means the Sharia. And as the Sharia prescribes death penalty, in this case, we just apply the word of God, which is at the heart of the human rights. Difficult for a non-Muslim to answer. It's up to the Muslim, but the progresses will come now, immediately, considering the Arab revolutions. In Tunisia, in constitutional project, Article 1, death penalty is abolished. In Morocco, you see very much progresses of the abolitionist movement, and I think that within a year it will be over. We'll see what will happen in Libya. In Egypt, I don't know. I'm not so optimistic for the present time, but the movement makes progresses.
Robert Badinter, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.